Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, November 3rd, 2017. Let's cross our fingers and hope everything is broadcasting as scheduled. We have a very sleepy laptop today, just dragging itself across the finish line. I hope it's across the finish line. I have no idea. Everything could be going just beautifully. Maybe not. And no, not connected. Okay. Well, that resolves that issue. I guess we're just not making it here, and we'll have to reboot. Okay, hang on just a second. I'll just check in with Justice here. Still nothing? Oh, what a sleepy old computer. Well. Okay, we will reboot and start over. How sad. Oh, okay. Oh, well, how about that? That's a great surprise. Okay, well, the word has come across that the last 5 seconds or so of dead air were my own fault, and just because I thought we were just not on the air. It was really dicey this morning. One more show, I think, you know what, it may be more than that. Shows from the basement today, and that means relying on the old laptop. I guess it's a good thing that I replaced it with, well, I wish it was a good thing that I had replaced it with the new Mac Mini in order to have a more reliable, more robust computer, but I'm locked out of the room, basically, that sits in, and although I can move it downstairs, I would have to rely on a somewhat shaky Wi-Fi connection, which I guess is the next improvement we have to make. Too bad. All right, well, I thought I would wing it and see if we can get the show started with a partial reboot of everything, and I guess it did. I just didn't know. I didn't get the message from Justice that everything was okay, not because he wasn't answering me, but because Skype was moving so slowly that it simply couldn't deliver. All right, so it's a little bit less professional of an introduction than usual, and I guess, what are you going to do? Live with it, I guess. We're working for minimum wage here. Anyway, wow. Well, everybody reports getting the message, at least. Okay, so thank you, everybody, and all the messages can stop now, I guess. And we'll open up the the rest of the computer and see if it slowly awakens and decides that we should be able to access our email and Pocket and all of the other great stories that I put aside for you. And if Skype is ready to work, then, maybe Armando, I wonder whether you might be interested in coming on the show today and discussing a little bit more. Perhaps, if not, that's okay. I have some stories to share with you, some tweet threads to share with you about the Donna Brazil story on which we spent the second hour yesterday, and lots and lots and lots of pushback to the story, as I think we all knew that there would be. But it's all good stuff, and I thought I would share a lot of it with you to try and clarify the story. Basically, it comes down to this. Armando did a lot of checking on the story, and his take on the story is, and it's hard to dispute it, which is really astounding, quite frankly. Apparently, the bulk of the discussion in the excerpt we read, which I understand is just one chapter of the book, seems to rely on this conclusion that things had not been as they should have been in the DNC, rested on the discovery of this fundraising agreement, this joint fundraising agreement, as between the Hillary Clinton campaign and the state parties. And you remember we read about that strange and I thought rather clever mechanism by which the Hillary Clinton campaign would raise money in joint fundraisers with the state and the state would get some amount of it, and her campaign would get some amount of it, and the DNC would get some other amount of it. And then the accusation was that the money never made it back to the states. Well, as we might have expected, there are complexities and nuances that go along with that. And there's also this other complexity and nuance, which is that she refers in the book to a joint fundraising agreement from 2015, and then says, well, the really bad part about this whole thing, we talked a lot about the nuance of the joint fundraising and where the money was going to sit and how it was going to move. Lots more information on that. But the really troublesome part of it was that she said that the joint fundraising agreement gave the Hillary Clinton campaign explicit rights to control the hiring at DNC, the communications directors, the top finance people, the people that would make the decisions about how the ground rules would be interpreted, not the ground rules, how the ground rules would be written. That was done much earlier, and that was done by the Rules Committee, and we all saw them do that. And although Bernie Sanders lost on a lot of fronts, if not all fronts, on the Rules Committee, it was a matter of being outvoted by people who had been on the Democratic National Committee for some time and knew next to nothing about Bernie Sanders because he wasn't a Democrat, and they sided with the person that they had been fighting alongside all along. No surprises there. But there was, it was a fairly serious allegation to make that Hillary Clinton got to put herself in nominal control of the levers of the DNC long before she was the nominee. And then it turns out that Armando has eyeballs, and he used them to read the 2015 joint fundraising agreement referenced by Donna Brazile, and it turned out that that fundraising agreement doesn't make any mention at all of any of the levers of control that she said it did. And now there was later fundraising agreements that were signed in 2016, and my understanding is that those were signed either much closer to the date or, in fact, after the date of her securing the nomination, and so she would have that nominal control of the DNC anyway, but I'm not 100% sure of it. What I am 100% sure of is that yesterday a lot of people spent a lot of time saying, I think you've confused the two versions of the joint fundraising agreement, and that's a huge premise of the argument of the book, and maybe like you shouldn't publish the thing until you correct that, and well, I guess it's a little bit too late for that. Anyway, there are some threads that explain it a lot more coherently than I just did. Why not just rely on some of those? Because, I don't know, I wanted to talk to you for a little while about some other stuff. All right, let me pull some of these out. There are a couple of them out there. This being the most, I think, the most interesting of the early ones from Elizabeth Rogers on Twitter, who tweets as a humorless femme. I expect that she's got quite a good sense of humor, and that's part of it right there. And so here, this is, I thought, very interesting. This came yesterday evening and was widely shared. Okay, she says, I am at home. I got a bunch of links open, and I am ready to start explaining in mind-numbing detail. Are you ready to have your mind numbed? In mind-numbing detail, the HVF, the Hillary Victory Fund. That was the joint fundraising, what would you call it? Organ, I suppose, that was created to handle all this money. And so she says that would be the Hillary Victory Fund. That was a joint fundraising agreement between the Clinton campaign, the DNC, and the state parties. Hillary Clinton has a Rolodex the size of Milwaukee, she says, and I think it might even be a fairly large city, larger even than Milwaukee. It's not physically bigger than Milwaukee. That's not the idea. The idea is that the population of Milwaukee would be in her. Okay, you get it. And she can and has raised. Well, she can raise and has raised enormous amounts of money. I don't think anybody disputes that. One reporter estimated that she had raised something like $3 billion for Democrats in 50 years in politics. That is, I don't know. I couldn't judge the quality of the estimate, but I guess I would say, if true, big if true, right? I will use the favorite reporter's phrase from Twitter. Big if true. It certainly is. And I think that maybe we could probably stop right there. We won't, because there's better stuff elsewhere. But that'll explain the ridiculous bias that members of the Democratic National Committee and rank and file members of the Democratic Party regulars will have in a situation like that, right? You got, on the one hand, for the job of President of the United States and head of the party, do you prefer the woman who has been involved intimately in the machinery of your party? Yes, machinery. I mean, I know that has a negative connotation for a lot of you, but machinery of the party for, well, apparently 50 years, and who has raised $3 billion for you along the way? Or will you take this guy who joined last week reluctantly and has made a career of, well, he bashes the Republican Party worse, but he's made a career of, well, trolling you. I mean, the Vermonters in the Vermont Democratic Party know that very well. And the rest of us really have never been privy to it because we're not from Vermont. It's a small place. Everybody knows everybody kind of place, at least in the circles of politics. And insular, too. Like, Vermont politics doesn't very often leak out into national politics. We don't usually cover what's going on there. Ask Vermont Democrats about Bernie Sanders, and you'll get a very mixed message. I love him. I'll vote for him every time and send him to the Senate. But if you're asking me questions about how does he deal with Democratic Party operatives, the answer is very different. I can agree with his positions, but he is a pain in the ass for the regular Democratic Party. That's just true. I saw it when I worked for his Senate campaign. It was a very, very dicey thing. And it was also very obvious because he was going, of course, to the State Democratic Party convention, working it because he was getting the Democratic nomination. They were not putting forward a Democratic candidate for the Senate in 2006 because they were getting out of the way for Bernie Sanders. But he was very clearly a visitor there. Everybody knew who he was because he was elected at large. Of course, the entire state voted for him for the House. But it was a very awkward situation. And people realized we're putting this guy up for Senate, and he's never come to one of these things. He doesn't know the people in the room. He doesn't come and shake hands and how are you? It's good to see you, because he doesn't know them. And it's weird and awkward, and it was even more noticeable at the national level. Anyway, so there you have it. I mean, the woman who raised $3 billion for you over the past 50 years, or this guy who, he's got some interesting ideas, and I wish Democrats would move closer to where he is, generally speaking. But do I know him? What has he done for us? What is he doing for? How close is he going to be to it? Will he do the job that, the unglamorous part of the president's job of being chief of the party and raising money? And he says he won't. And I believe him. So what do we do? All right, back to Elizabeth Rogers, though. So, when the Supreme Court struck down caps on how much people could give, she was able to ruthlessly exploit a loophole. She was a $3 billion raiser, and now she had opportunity to raise even more, right? Which means she could and did raise up to $700,000 per person per year for the 32 parties, her campaign, and the DNC. That would be the 32 state parties that signed on to the agreement. Hillary Clinton was not running for prom queen. Remember, she was running for president, and yes, that means exploiting all fundraising options, even ones that piss you off personally. So, Clinton started raising money with this joint fund, and raise they did. She got $529 million through it. That is a lot. And by way of proof, she embeds this screen grab, which I think she later tells us all of her sources for these screen grabs are opensecrets.org, which basically is an aggregator of FEC filings. And it's a good aggregator. Sometimes people dismiss aggregators as just stealing other people's content. They reorganize it and I think put it in very usable fashion, searchable, usable fashion. Anyway, total receipts, $529,943,912, accounting for everything, I guess. Now, total spent, well, almost all of that, $529,524,145. There's more. The beginning cash was zero. Cash on hand now, or at least at this time of this report, with $419,767. Debts, zero. Not bad, right? Date of report, December 31st, 2016. Elizabeth continues, there was a catch, though, but there was a catch. She couldn't, this is the important part, she couldn't really send out the money yet because she wasn't the nominee officially. So what's this talking about here? Talking about raising $529 million and then the complaint that we heard yesterday. States aren't getting their share. States were having their shares siphoned off. They signed agreements with the understanding that they were going to get a cut of the money she raised with them, and they weren't getting that money. What did they say yesterday? Oh, like less than 0.5% was going back to these states, et cetera, et cetera. That's, again, a fairly serious charge. I was upset to learn that because, of course, my preference for Hillary Clinton as a candidate in the primaries was premised on the worry that Bernie Sanders wouldn't be doing anything to help build the Democratic Party in the states or nationally or anywhere because he didn't truly actually believe in it as an organization, as an entity. And I can't blame him for doing that. People have legitimate reasons for feeling that way, but that he's built a career on that. And so I didn't think he was going to turn around and undo it anytime soon. But then to find out, well, people are saying that Hillary Clinton isn't doing it either. Well, then, if all other things were equal, and I'm not certain that they are, it seems clear that they're not, but if they were, then I might say, well, okay, in that case, I prefer his positions after all. And I think he'll be as good a chief of the party as the one who isn't sending any of the money she promised. So how about that? Well, okay, it turns out there's a problem with that too. And I love the process stuff. This sounds like it makes sense. It has the ring of truth. I don't know this offhand. I don't know campaign finance law offhand. On the other hand, you might have thought that perhaps Donna Brazile did. The problem here that Elizabeth Rogers is outlining is the money comes in, yes, it has to flow. The checks are written to the Hillary Victory Fund. They come in, and I guess you're supposed to, ideally, then take the portion that the state's supposed to get and hand it over to the state. But there's a problem. Hillary Clinton, as we know, as the excerpt made very clear, is not yet the nominee of the Democratic Party. And so, on the one hand, therefore, ought not to be leveraging the hiring mechanisms at the DNC and making the final call about who gets what job where. But in addition, because the nomination isn't settled officially at this point, because at this point, though he's very nearly eliminated mathematically, Bernie Sanders is fighting on. We're going to go to this state. We're going to go to this state. We're going to give everybody the chance to do these things, to cast their votes, which is certainly a nice thing to do, but it has complications, right? I want everybody to have the opportunity to cast their vote for me if they want to, even if I'm not going to win. They've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and I'm not going to walk away from giving them the chance to express themselves in a democratic society. Okay. Terrific. Very nice. But also, I guess, something that doesn't, if this is the way it works, then somebody who doesn't have any idea of how the party politics part of campaign finance works, because he's never been a member of a party, also likely wouldn't know this. But then again, I didn't know it, but I'm not a pro, right? You can't, the campaign finance law stands in the way of this stuff. The nominee can apparently release these funds to the state parties in support of her race for the presidency. But until she's officially the nominee, apparently there's a legal problem with releasing those funds back to the states. She was waiting for Bernie to either drop out or for the convention to finally come around and say, all right, terrific, finally now you are officially the nominee. And now, according to the law, which apparently is written in a stupid enough way to prevent it up to now the law says you can hand the states their money. So, did she? Let's find out. Elizabeth Rogers says she did. Elizabeth continues now to say, so, there was this catch. She couldn't really send out the money yet because she wasn't officially the nominee, which meant she could benefit with her portion, which was substantial. Well, the money that she had raised was supposed to go to the Hillary Clinton campaign. There was a lot of it, $158 million, $158.2 million, as a matter of fact. That includes the embedded line item here from Open Secrets. Well, she writes, that is a lot of money. How dare she keep all that? Well, she's not really accommodating to Bernie fans. So I'll edit things a little bit just to keep things civil here for the show. But I got to give you a taste of what she's talking about. In case you haven't read the tweet thread, she then says, shut up, burner. I am not done. Now, that's not going to help anything. But okay, she's incensed, and maybe she's right to be incensed. But okay, well, we just want the facts. We're going to stick to that, I think. Elizabeth then continues, during that time, she kept racking up the money, and it was stuck in a bank account waiting for Sanders, as she says here, to accept reality. That is to say, to either drop out or concede the nomination to Hillary so that she would then be legally able to transfer the money, according to this version of the story, over to the state parties. Now, she continues again, as since the media hates all things Hillary, that's arguably true, the media started making claims. We have here a Politico headline that was at the basis of all this story from Donna Brazile and others. Clinton fundraising leaves little for state parties. That was the basis of what Brazile had to say in yesterday's excerpt. That was Politico, by the way. They hate her there, and it is no surprise their idiot reporters graduated up to the New York Times. Okay, well, that a little more Elizabeth opinion sneaking through on that one. The Washington Post even joined in. Here is an excerpt from the Post that says, but the states have yet to see a financial windfall. Meanwhile, Clinton's campaign has been a major beneficiary, getting an infusion of low-dollar contributions through the committee at a time when rival Bernie Sanders' army of small donors is helping him close in on her financially. The fund is run by Clinton campaign staff, and this other stuff is in the way. And its treasurer, I keep moving the cursor and then it reveals it there. And its treasurer is Clinton's chief operating officer. Okay. So meant to show the overlap between her campaign and the DNC. Elizabeth continues here. But wait, Bernie Sanders fans say, that means it's true she didn't help. Well, she disagrees. And she says they probably forgot the posted amount up there of how much Clinton got. Here's the reminder, $158,200,000, which, as you'll recall, is considerably less than the $529,943,912 actually raised. So, good point. You raised $530 million, and Clinton's share of it for the campaign is $158 million. What is up with the other, how much? 150. What is the math on that? Is that not posted in this thing? All right. Well, let's just for the sake of clarity, we'll do the math on that just so we know what we're talking about. Let's say we'll call it $530 million minus $158 million is $372 million left in the pot. Now, Elizabeth says, I am definitely not a math genius, but even I can see that $158 million is a lot less than $529 million. And so can I, and now with the help of a calculator, I can tell you how much less it is. So, what happened to the rest of that money? She presumes here that there will be Sanders fans or even Trump fans or others who will say things like, well, it was pocketed by Clinton, or she sent it to the Clinton Foundation. No, she didn't. Here's where it went, or at least in part, the beginning part of it. There is a listed disbursement here to DNC Services Corporation, of $107,533,318, which also sounds like a lot. DNC Services Corporation. That sounds odd. What is that? Some shadowy, nefarious entity? A slush fund? No. It's the DNC's official name. That's right. I guess. She gave it to the DNC. Is that its official name? I hadn't heard that. But again, I would not be surprised if there was, in fact, a corporation named that, and it is the intake arm of the DNC, although I don't think any of you if any of you have ever donated to the DNC, I doubt very much whether you wrote your check to the DNC Services Corporation, but maybe. If you're a huge donor, maybe you know that. Okay, so that's the official name, that's the claim. But the DNC certainly got it somehow. $107 million of it dispersed to the DNC. Unlike the rest of us who are pretty effing mad at them right now. Anyway, back to the rest of the money, says Elizabeth. This is where it went. And now the really interesting part. The listing of several states here getting several fairly substantial awards, I suppose you could call it, from this victory fund. The Democratic Party of North Carolina, $3.4 million. Michigan Democratic Party, $3.2 million. Florida, $3 million. New Hampshire, $3 million. Nevada, $3 million. Virginia, $3 million. It's starting to create like almost a pattern here. We're seeing state after state getting a $3 million disbursement. Nevada, Virginia, Missouri, Colorado, Arkansas, Ohio, Minnesota, Mississippi, Oregon, Rhode Island, despite the small size, the small stature. All of them getting about $3 million with a little extra for North Carolina, a little bit extra for Michigan. Remember, she ignored that, right? She hates Michigan, so she lost. We'll be back with this thread after this break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. When we last left you, we were reading off part of a list of the states to which the Hillary Clinton Victory Fund had made $3 million plus disbursements. They're all slightly over $3 million. I don't want to bore you with the details, but I suppose if you're running down a list of 32 states, eventually even the ones that are 3 million with a plus of, in some cases they're all pretty close. I wonder what the formula was. But for the most part, you're talking about under $100,000 above the 3 million mark, with the exception of North Carolina and Michigan, which broke the 3.0 XXX mark. But the rest of them are all basically $3 million contributions. There's more, though. Wyoming. Wow, $3 million for the Wyoming State Democratic Central Committee. I mean, did they need that? I don't know, but they got it because that was their share. South Carolina, again, to this point, $3 million plus for every single one of these states. So where were we? South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Maine, Idaho, Indiana, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Utah, Alaska. Now we're starting to hit the point where the donations are slightly under $3 million. We're still talking about $2,996,900 to Montana. And let's see, Texas is there, Wisconsin is there, Pennsylvania, Iowa, New Jersey, Delaware, and there's another panel of these things. After Delaware comes Kansas, New Mexico, South Dakota. And then there's also a DNC travel offset account that got $46,000. And it says here, probably a refund, a women count pack that got $12. That sounds like there was some kind of expense transfer there or a refund of some kind. Okay, so, well, that was a lot of money. And I don't know whether that was 32 states, but that's damn close to it. And each one of them getting about $3 million. So Elizabeth says that's what happened to the money Politico was whining about not being dispersed to the states. What happened to it? It was dispersed to the states. Because Clinton wasn't the nominee for so long, she couldn't hand out the cash timely, which means they had to play catch-up, and which means, of course, some angry and annoyed state officials who may or may not know what the actual score is with regard to the law. They very frequently rely on staff to tell them what's going on these things. But in the meantime, they could be getting agitated and angry and upset. Yes, where was the money we were supposed to get? And the answer is it's sitting in escrow waiting for me to become the nominee so I can hand it back to you. That's a pretty strange situation. Now, in all the so very many ways that Bernie Sanders, she says, screwed with, we'll have to say it for radio, with the Democratic Party, his staying in long past time to drop out was one of them. That, I guess, did create some problems because those states could have used the money in March of 2016. And certain states really could have used it more so than others. And they really needed that extra oomph, as she says. So, as I said earlier, this is why, let's say, I'm angry at Bernie Sanders, she says. There's a couple of them here. Let's see. Some states that really needed some additional money. There was the Wisconsin money, $2.9 million, $2.8 million for Pennsylvania. And let's see what else here. Michigan, $3.2 million. And do those sound familiar to you? Those are, of course, states that she ended up losing in the Electoral College very, very narrowly. The place where some 70,000 or so total votes as between the three states made the difference between Hillary Clinton being president and allegedly Donald Trump being president. And she didn't do anything, and she didn't campaign there, and she didn't, she had $3 million for each one of their state committees, though I suppose you could have argued that maybe they should have gotten more, but that wasn't what the agreement was. They shared it out pretty equally, which actually is pretty amazing for some of those small states. Like, again, there's $3 million for the state party in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, and $3 million for the Democrats in Wyoming is pretty astounding. Anyway, so let's see. Does the rest? There's a little bit more to that thread, but I think that's the bulk of it. Armando has made some comments in the background that I want to try and catch up on as well, and a couple of you have made comments via Twitter as well. Now, he does offer this. Hey, you want me to piss people off about the DNC business? Because I can. I don't know if that's exactly what I want, but I'd be willing to have you on the air and risk it. I don't want to send people away pissed off here. I was hoping to bring everybody together with factual information, but yeah, it seems like there's some tremendous problems with the claim, which is problematic in itself because it's coming out as in book form, and of course, it should be noted, lots of people latched onto it yesterday, including the worst possible person, Donald Trump, who has been tweet ranting this morning that everything is horrible and illegal and they ought to arrest him. This comes to lock it up territory for him. It's all illegal. Now, one thing he tweeted last night, even Donna Brazile admits that this money was illegally laundered. Remember, she hinted at money laundering, or that it felt like money laundering, and he's actually on the hook for money laundering. So what do you think he's going to do with that piece of information? Which isn't even true because, of course, the one thing that Donna Brazile did state explicitly in all of this is that nothing illegal happened, that she looked high and low for internal corruption, which was troubling enough but not illegal, and couldn't find any of that, which is pretty amazing. And then, but I mean, as far as the legality of it, she was pretty explicit. I got to tell you, there's nothing whatsoever that's illegal about this. But put that on the table for Donald Trump, that goes out the window. Of course, immediately he's ready to lock everybody up. Why isn't the FBI investigating crooked Hillary? Yada, yada, DOJ, blah, blah, blah. Where are you? How come you're not doing anything? I surmised that since he took over the DOJ as another Trump acquisition, they've been bankrupt and they haven't been able to do anything. That's more likely explanation. But She's going to have a lot of explaining to do, but she might not care. And I'm disappointed because I said at the outset yesterday, I kind of trust Donna Brazile. I don't know if she's my favorite person of all time, but, generally speaking, I would have said yesterday, I did say yesterday, I would have trusted her to write a book where she got the date of her documents right. I thought she would do that. And I guess she didn't. Armando is here. He was the first person I saw pointing out, yeah, you got the, I think you might be at least confusing 2 or more documents that are out there. Armando, go ahead.
It was my scoop. No one's giving me credit for it.
I just did it.
I actually was the first person to notice that.
I figured you were the first person I saw because, it's my Twitter feed and it was 11. So I turned off the radio thing and, oh, look, there's Armando. But so I could have missed.
No, but you know me. I've been obsessed with this crazy nomination contest process.
It's important
for a while now, and it's really funny because we're arguing about 2016, but the most important thing that's happening now is the DNC, through its Unity and Reform Commission, is now determining what the rules will be for 2020.
Yes.
Now is when the quote rigging, unquote rigging would be happening.
Yes.
All right.
Now,
look, people can have legitimate differences of opinion. I have a very big difference of opinion with the Sanders delegates on the URC. They're very favorable to caucuses, which I consider voter suppression. So I argue with them all the time in not so nice terms.
Yes,
but
I do not argue with them.
It's not a Brazil business.
You
know, I saw the thread you're talking about. I think, listen, I don't disagree with what she wrote, but there is a fundamental point here about these joint financing agreements and the way they were developed.
Okay.
In 2014, the Supreme Court issued a decision in McCutcheon that stripped the limits on donations to parties by individuals.
Yes, okay.
All right. So now parties could donate almost limitless. Individuals can donate. I believe the new number ended up being, and I don't know why that was legitimate as opposed to a smaller number, but the Supreme Court on campaign finance is a complete disaster. But let's see where this comes from. In 2014, the limits basically went up to $300,000 per person for party donations.
Yes, and it doubles for married couples because you give things. Money for your spouse, and that's how we got to the $700 that Elizabeth mentioned.
And you might have, if you went through this already, I apologize.
I don't know,
but
I can't remember.
The point is that did favor Clinton.
Yes,
but the Supreme Court favored Clinton. When the Supreme Court decides something, now they say, "Oh, was it illegal?" You talk about Trump saying it's illegal, and I agree that he's wrong. But I don't get the unethical. What's unethical about raising money legally for a campaign?
Nothing.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I don't know that it's. I can say nothing. There are ways of raising money that are more or less distasteful. But I mean, I think it even clears the ethical bar if it's like, well, the other guy is definitely going to do it and more. And if you think outlawing abortion and starting a nuclear war is worth, playing these parlor games, then fine. But I don't, so I'm raising the money.
Right. So, what was very weird about Brazile's article, and I guess her book will be just as weird, is the entire story. Did you get a chance to read her article?
The Politico one? Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the first thing that jumped out at me is she was very critical of, quote, extravagant fundraisers.
Okay.
All right. Now, here's my question. She's been in the DNC and in politics for 30 years?
A long time, yes.
The DNC is basically an extravagant fundraiser operation.
Yes,
that's what it
does.
Know
where she would have missed the chance to observe this
before. Was she shocked that they have high-dollar fundraisers? That's
sure
what the DNC's for. It's a super PAC.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, that was so. At that point, I knew it was going to be disingenuous and dishonest. Because please do not pretend to be shocked to discover there are extravagant fundraisers held by parties. Donald Trump has probably had 20 of those for the RNC this year. And the reason he does them for the RNC is because the limits are higher. So a high dollar donor can pay $30,000 for a ticket. Yeah. Whereas, as you know, in a campaign, the maximum individual donation is $2,700.
Yeah.
This is not new. This is not shocking to anybody who's in politics. And Donna Brazile is in it.
Yes.
Believe you me, if she wasn't doing extravagant fundraisers when she was in charge of the DNC, then she wasn't doing her job.
There's no denying that she knows that goes on. I don't think she was surprised.
But she pretended
by
she
it,
did not. She pretended it was some new Clinton invention to do an extravagant fundraiser.
Well,
all right,
it's not.
But then there's part two, which you've talked about, which is, well, the JFA gave Clinton control over messaging and communications and God knows what in the DNC. First and foremost, to me, whoever read a message from the DNC ever? Can you name one communication the DNC has ever made about anything?
Me, no. Reporters do. I don't know why, but they do. I'm sure some other regular.
You know what? If there
were
so many bad messages happening during the 2016 campaign, you should be able to identify them. Tell me which particular DNC message did you find stilted and pro-Clinton?
I don't know. But that's not my game. Somebody else will.
I know, but there is. Do you see my point?
Yes.
Though?
Well, there was a lot.
Her big thing is it was horrible that this. First of all, I don't think that happened. As you know, I think it's she. I really do believe either on purpose or by sheer incompetence, she's confused the 2016 JFA with the 2015 JFA. Remember, there was an amendment to the JFA in June of 2016, and it was written about. And it basically said, yeah, now Clinton's taken over the party. Well, in June 2016, she was the presumptive nominee. She had won. It was over. I know Bernie didn't know it was over, but it was over.
Yes.
That can't be the issue, or shouldn't be an issue, unless you want an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I was under the impression that I could trust Donna Brazile to get those dates right, and that a joint fundraising agreement in 2015, which gave her control. Although honestly, I thought, well, that's actually terribly clever if they really did do that. And then I think it's wrong, and it wouldn't be the way I would wish a party would operate. But ultimately, even that, I was willing to say, if the party's bankrupt, and now I don't even know whether that's the truth, but if the party was bankrupt essentially and heavily in debt, and the one person who could possibly raise enough money to, one, bail out the DNC, and two, still run a billion-dollar presidential race at the same time, says, I'll do it, then you know what? I mean, it's like you're going to have to get out of her way because...
Look, in hindsight, Clinton knows that she should never have given any money to the DNC. She'd actually... could have gone to the 32 state parties and done just as well. She didn't need the DNC, but why was she defending the DNC? Because it actually has some value. She wanted it to be viable as a fundraising vehicle. It is a super PAC. It's Priorities USA, except with higher limits. So,
yes, and that is something that's important to remember as we occasionally remind people of what the actual role of, say, the DCCC is. It's not to reflect grassroots opinion of where the Democratic Party ought to be nationally. We wish that it was that, and we like to think of it as that, and sometimes it does do that depending on who's leading it, but it is a big, giant bank account for paying for all the stuff, all the trappings of making sure that the Democratic nominee for president is a competitive, in presidential races every 4 years.
Listen, let me point out one other thing from the Brazile article that should shock people. It should shock people. She says that she met with Gary Gensler, who was the finance guy for the Clinton campaign in August of 2016. Remember, she doesn't become the interim chair until the convention.
Yeah,
she wasn't involved in anything. Really, until August, and even then, when I say involvement, I'm frankly sneering.
At the top.
Her name was put at the top, but the DNC after
she's been on the DNC
after
since
a nominee
forever.
is chosen is run by the campaign. Period.
Yes,
She
right.
didn't run anything. She sat in the corner office and ordered
This is how
lunch.
she had time to do this checking around and auditing. That was the
yeah,
point.
she did her super sleuthing. And after her fine vacation in Martha's Vineyard, she found the AHA
yes.
document, which everybody knew about 2 years ago.
Yeah, but
2
just
years.
again, pro
So-
tip. I was on vacation. Period.
She wrote that she was at Martha's
I know,
Vineyard.
right?
I didn't-
Exactly. I just really don't
She's
say
bragging.
it.
Anyway, so let's get that. And what did Gensler say? Well, the finances stink.
Yeah.
We've taken over. This is in August.
Right.
Of course he'd taken over by August. She doesn't say, oh, well, we took over in August of 2015. No, she doesn't actually quote, I know why they're not talking. They don't want to give this any more legs. But if anyone really wanted to dig into this, I think you're going to find that almost everything Brazil said is false in that story. I got to be perfectly honest with you. I think you're going to find that most of what's in there is just not true. But the fact is, what did Brazil say she discovered? We haven't seen that document. We have seen the JFA from 2015, and there's a JFA from 2016, actually, that was filed with the FEC that also doesn't have any, quote, control provisions. Those things aren't usually written down, are they? I mean, it's almost like she said that she did an investigation. She went top to bottom, and the DNC, in fact, never did anything to tip the scales. And that's not surprising in that during the primaries, the DNC doesn't even have the power to do anything to tip the scales. The DNC, after it makes its rules, is basically nothing except a waiting super PAC for the nominee. And yet, with the JFAs, it was also developed to be something that the candidates could start raising money for the general election early by having through a JFA, because then their high dollar donors can donate a lot more to the party. It's held in escrow, as you were talking about before, and then is used afterwards. That's all that happened. So what exactly is she saying that she had this? The other thing is, David, she said she had this terrible call with Bernie on September 7th. You discovered that there was a JFA. Bernie just complained about the JFAs.
Yes.
Publicly.
I mean, I do remember those. I again, one of those things where I said, I heard about this, didn't I? I don't have the article at my fingertips, but I didn't hear necessarily about the transfer of control of the DNC or anything like that. But I remember hearing about the joint fundraising things and thinking that's kind of clever. Also, it kind of occurs to me as you keep repeating the issue of the dates that the very first thing out of the box when I was reading the article was that I was confused about. I said, this article is leaving me confused about the dates of the things that are happening here. Is this 2000? When did she call him? September 2016?
Yes.
17? I mean, that wasn't what she was confusing,
but that's purposeful on her part.
I guess so. I mean, it strikes me now. At the time, it was like she must just be rattling off things off the top of her head. She thinks everybody knows, but I don't know.
Listen,
so anyway, I was lost.
I have a theory.
Yes?
It's speculation, but I think it's true.
Okay.
She pitched a book. Someone said, we need a hook. We need to, we need to sell. What are we going to use to sell this? And she told her ghostwriter, put in something about the DNC stuff and how it wasn't kosher. And her ghostwriter wrote what he wrote. And I think he ghostwrote the Politico article. I'll bet you dollars to donuts she didn't write a single word of that article or her book. What do you think of that?
I don't know. I hope so, because I used to trust her, and now I can't.
But why did you trust her? Let me remind the other side, and I call it the people who are calling it rigging, the other side here of this discussion.
Yeah.
What you were saying about Donna Brazile when she passed debate questions.
Yeah.
You called her a liar. And you know what?
I did?
Not you. They.
Oh, dang it. Okay.
They did. The other side.
Oh, they did.
The rigging.
Okay.
This proves rigging side.
Oh, yes. All right.
You called her a liar. And you know what? She did lie.
Uh-oh.
She denied having passed the
They were right.
debate questions. And then they, Assange hacked and found the emails or whatever, and it proved that she did. And she lied about it. She flat out lied about it, David. So what is Donna Brazil's credibility here? She's just like every other person in politics. They're all pretty much liars, in my opinion. And I'm not saying that because I don't think the Clinton side won't lie. Of course they will. And they may be lying too. There might have been a handshake agreement that they controlled the DNC, for all I know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's possible.
I was surprised that anybody would have put that in writing. That was another thing.
That's the part that doesn't seem likely to me.
And then of course it turns out, the document she's talking about does not have that written in it. So I don't know whether they either did a good job, like I said, don't write that down, or maybe you should. I figured in the end that, not having seen the document, well, she must be right. It must have been written down because she said she read it. You have to do that in order to read it.
You know what? I don't even trust her reading.
I guess not. It's not in there.
I would like to see the language that she says gives them control. I don't believe any part of the story, to be perfectly honest. And here's one of the main reasons. What's the point of controlling the DNC?
That is a very good question.
The DNC is useless.
And again, people just don't know what it is and isn't.
What can the DNC do for you during the primaries? Nothing. Actually, what can the DNC do for you anytime? Nothing. The DNC does two things, in my opinion. It sets the rules for nomination. Mm-hmm. Important. Going on right now. And if you care about these things and you purport to care about them,
yes,
that's what you really should be looking at. Because there's a lot of bad proposals that are being forwarded by the Sanders delegates to the Unity Commission to promote and preserve caucuses, which I believe are institutional voter suppression. I've felt this for 20 years at least. So this isn't about Clinton and Sanders. I've always despised caucuses as voter suppression. And that Democrats are institutionalizing voter suppression is an outrage. Look, some states won't hold primaries. I get that. And in that case, you have to do a caucus. But what you do is you do it as open as possible. That is, to the degree possible, you make it just drop off your ballot, no going into the corners like that stupid Iowa caucus, which is a travesty of democracy. Iowa should not even be first, but it really shouldn't be first when it has one of the most oppressively voter suppression approaches that you can possibly imagine. No secret ballot. Mm-hmm. No opening. You got to be there between 6 and 8. What if I got something to do between 6 and 8?
Yeah.
Why do we want early voting? Florida has 8 days of early voting for the primaries and for the general election. That, including Saturdays, and it's 12 hours a day. So there's a total of about 100 hours or whatever of early voting. There's 2 hours of voting at the Iowa caucus, which is more voter friendly. It's a no-brainer. But the Sanders delegates would object to the Florida system because it's a closed primary, but they would prefer the Iowa caucuses to the Florida primary. They are in favor of voter suppression. That's not right. It's an outrage. And if people really care about rigging and the process, that's what they should be talking about. But they don't. They're for their teams. And that's how everything's prisoned. Beyond that, the other thing that's a real problem is political reporters don't know anything. They reported the joint financing agreement as if it was some big new breaking reveal. Then finally, a few of them said, hey, excuse me, we all sort of knew this. And in fact, Bernie had one too, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And it's embarrassing. But there's no bigger group of incompetents than political reporters. They are really terrible at their job. If you and I were as bad at our jobs as they are at theirs, we'd be fired. They get promoted. I mean, look at Mark Halperin.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the sexual harassment. I'm talking about the quality of his work as a journalist. He was the worst. But, there's no meritocracy in the political reporting field. it's a joke. So, I understand that people should and do recognize that the joint financing agreement, which was created in essence by the Supreme Court, is something that disfavored Bernie Sanders. It did. It favored Hillary Clinton. But the DNC had nothing. Well, I guess they could have just not done joint fund JFAs, but then how were they going to survive? They want money too.
Yeah.
And this was someone giving them free money.
They got an awful lot of it. It didn't come as soon as they thought, but yeah. Well, there's still some question about that, and I'd love to see what the rules and the law is on this stuff about why is it, or I'd love to read the language that says you can't disperse funds until you're the nominee. It's truthy sounding. It sounds like the sort of regulation that would be in place.
I have an answer for you.
You do? Okay. Well,
we can do it on the other side of the break.
After the break. Yes.
Suspense. Hold the listeners in suspense.
This is such suspenseful music too. So, all right. We will be back then, Armando. Hang on, and we'll be back after this next break for station identification. You're listening to a station, which is terrific. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We have our short station identification break, the station having been identified. We now continue with our discussion, and we're in our 15th hour of the Donna Brazil discussion. I know,
yeah.
And it's tough, but there's a lot to uncover. Because I spent so much time on it yesterday, I feel like we have to spend a lot of time on the corrections today, and it's important stuff, as you mentioned. Armando is still with us, thankfully, for the other side of the break. And before we jump right back in, I will remind everybody of what you said earlier. The important stuff is going on now. That is to say, the rules, to the extent that anything is rigged, it is rigged through the rules. And you basically make rules that you think will be advantageous to whoever you're guessing might be your favorite nominee next time around. Or you could approach it neutrally, as many DNC members probably do, and say, I don't know. But you design how the primaries will go and what you're going to do afterwards, and how the nominee will be named and who's allowed to be a delegate and what kind of diversity requirements you're going to have, all of that stuff, and whether there's going to be debates and what the policy is there. And it's decided now in the unsexy part of the political cycle, when people who show up for presidential elections and nothing else are asleep. And you might think it's done purposefully at that point, but of course, I mean, when else are you going to do it? You got to do it before the next presidential cycle, right? And it's a lot of work and it takes a long time, so you need a lot of lead time, right? So you can have your various candidates be able to be familiar with, have an opportunity to shape the rules, study the rules, figure out a strategy years in advance, because people who are going to be running in 2020 are in late 2018 going to start visiting places and talking about it, which means they've been thinking about it since forever. The rules have to be set early. And the other part of the equation is, the rules are set by insiders who are all, jerks and dirty players and have been bribed and whatever else you want to throw at the insiders who are all coastal elites, etc. You know what? The rules are written by the people who show up and ask their fellow delegates at the state and local level to please trust them and pass them on to the next level up. These are all elected spots. The DNC is 400 plus people, and there are some people on there who are appointed, and I don't love that they are, but I understand the mechanism, that they gave themselves to appoint people who are prominent contributors, not just financially, but also policy-wise and politically, to the DNC, and who otherwise wouldn't or couldn't or shouldn't stand for election to the DNC. But it's 450, 470 people, 400 of whom are elected by local Democrats who slog it out and go to the unsexy, boring, stupid meetings that the rest of us can't be bothered with, because we want to show up and cast our ballot in 10 minutes or less once every 4 years. And then we say, the rules are rigged. You could rig them. But you know what it takes? A lifetime of commitment. So, are you up for it?
At least a lot of showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, David, let me answer the question that we left hanging on the other side, which is why could they not get the money until the general election?
Right. I forget.
There are two sets of contribution limits under the campaign finance laws. They apply to primaries and general elections.
Right.
For individuals, what people most
yes.
often know, it's $2,700. You can donate $2,700 to a primary campaign.
Yeah.
And you can donate another $2,700 to a general election campaign.
Right,
i.e.
true.
a total of $5,400. The $2,700 for the general election campaign only gets spent in what is for when you are, quote, the candidate, the nominee of the party for the office that was the donation for. This same rule applies to donations to the DNC. In that sense, the DNC, when it collected as a fundraiser, and the maximum individual donation is $33,400, right? Just for that. And then there's a separate basket for election processes, and those would have two components. So the reason why you had to wait is that you needed to wait till there was a, quote, general election going forward.
That's right.
That's
it. I
since Sanders hadn't conceded, is the argument that's presented by the thread that you mentioned, the DNC could not donate to state election, general election funds for use right away. That's why it was being held in escrow until, quote, the general election, unquote, started. Mm-hmm. So it's a technicality, but that's the explanation. Can I go to the issue that you were talking about before, though, which is this process now that's going on? Normally, they can be sleepy affairs, the rules. In 2012, of course, we did not have a competitive primary, so there was nothing to do.
Right.
President Obama was running for re-election, and even though Bernie Sanders flirted with challenging him in a primary, he didn't, so we had no challenge, and the rules just didn't matter.
Right.
Prior to the 2008, there was a lot of discussion, not so much about the rules, but the calendar.
Yes. Which
I don't
was
know
set
if you
by the
remember
rules.
that whole brouhaha about the calendar.
Yes, I do. And, we had some discussion about that at the time, in a different setting, a different forum. But yeah, and I remember, at the time, the big fight over, well, I'll let you tell the story, I guess. I mean, as I recall, are we going to the question of what to do with the delegates from the states that broke the rules about their calendar?
Yeah, the problem, and again, Donna Brazile was involved yet again. She's always in the middle of these things.
Well, she's done the lifetime of commitment stuff.
Yes. Well, before the 2008 primary started, there was discussion about schedule. And back then, the Iowa-New Hampshire monopoly on being first was very controversial, and people didn't like it.
It's still controversial.
The compromise they came up with was Iowa would go first. We'd have two caucuses. Remember, New Hampshire is the first in the nation primary, and Iowa was moved ahead of them in 76 and they called it a caucus. That's when the caucus was invented as something people decided was good. And it was really just a creation so that Iowa could go first.
I feel like you may have told me that, but I'm going to react as though I never heard it before.
All right, but they did. So they
felt that way.
To placate New Hampshire, but also placate the people that didn't like Iowa, New Hampshire going 1-2, they said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to move Nevada, which also is a caucus, ahead of New Hampshire. So New Hampshire can still be the first in the nation primary, but they won't go second, and we can have a little more diversity at the front because Nevada's more diverse, et cetera. And Nevada created an Iowa-style caucus, which is the worst possible caucus, as proven again in 2016. It's just a recipe for disaster, and disaster it was. And it was a disaster in 2008 as well. Caucuses are terrible in every single way, and they cost the party money, by the way. Primaries are paid for by the state government. Caucuses are paid for by the state party. That is, it costs us money to have voter suppression. So, wonderful. But anyway, in 2008, it was supposed to be Iowa, Nevada, New Hampshire, South Carolina. New Hampshire didn't like it. They passed a law and violated the DNC rules and put themselves back ahead of Nevada.
Yeah.
And then after New Hampshire did that, other states got all pissy about it, particularly two very infamous ones, Florida and Michigan.
Yes.
They moved up their primaries. Florida did it through its Republican legislature, and they moved it up. Under the Republican rules, actually, they have the delegates that they were able to get. Under the DNC rules, even though they did not have to do that by the rules, they did not follow the rules in 2008, by the way, they stripped Florida completely, and they stripped Michigan completely. And they said any candidate that can't, and then the candidates signed some pledge about they weren't going to campaign there. It was a disaster and stupid. And then, of course, it culminated in the entire mess that we had at the end, because Florida and Michigan didn't, and they're big states, and there were tons of delegates. The reality is you could argue, and Clinton people argued, that, you know, if you had respected the Florida-Michigan results, Hillary would have won.
Yes.
Chaos ensued, you know, all the Puma stuff and everything else that happened.
Yes.
Okay. Fast forward to 2012, nothing happens. 2016, they use the exact same rules again. Nobody talks about it. But because of all the rigged and nonsense at the convention to placate Bernie, they passed a resolution to form a Unity and Reform Commission.
Yeah.
And Clinton got most half plus one or two, and Bernie got the rest of the named members of that commission.
Yes.
The resolution says they have the following mandate. They are to encourage primary elections.
Okay.
They are to reform caucuses to make them more voter friendly. To wit, think about what's called the Firehouse Caucus, which is in essence to make a process by which you make a caucus as much like a primary as possible.
Oh, you've opened a whole new can of worms for some other day.
Yes. But anyway, the idea would be to make them as much as primaries as possible. And 3, reform the superdelegate situation.
Yeah.
The superdelegate situation is actually already just established in that resolution. Elected officials will remain as unpledged delegates.
Yes. Okay.
All right?
Members of Congress.
Yeah, members of Congress,
Democratic
and
governors,
things like that.
Yeah.
Everybody else is a superdelegate. Everyone else who's a superdelegate has to vote. Excuse me. Proportionally with how their state voted.
Oh, okay.
So, you're a superdelegate in Georgia. Georgia goes 50 for Bernie, 50 for Kamala Harris.
Okay.
There are 4 superdelegates. Amongst the 4 of them, they have to decide 2 of you are voting for Bernie, 2 of you are voting for Kamala Harris.
Yes.
That's
going to be such a disaster. All right.
Oh, it's terrible. I think they should just eliminate the vote for superdelegates. They're delegates on and they get to vote on other stuff, but not on who's the nominee. That's my personal preference. But whatever it is, that's written into the resolution, so even that's already solved. But let's go by pieces. How would you encourage primary elections?
I
got one simple rule for you.
All right.
See if you like this rule. If your state holds a primary, you must use the results of that primary for delegate selection. That's not encouraging. That's telling you if you have one, use it.
But they do that now.
No, they do not.
They don't?
They do not. In Washington.
Oh, well, that's true. Sometimes they have conventions.
And in Nebraska, the primary results are ignored.
That is true. There are some
the state parties hold
non-binding
caucuses.
primaries. That's right.
And in both of these, even beauty contest primaries, there was 4 times the voter participation in these beauty contest primaries than there were in the caucuses.
Right. Okay. I see what you mean.
Caucuses are institutional voter suppression. Period. End of story.
Okay.
Now, that would be my rule. I think it's a simple rule. Unfortunately, the Sanders delegates don't really favor voter participation. They favor rules that they believe favor Bernie. Bernie performed very well in caucuses relative to his performance in primaries. Therefore, they want to preserve caucuses. Jane Fleming Klebb is the Nebraska State Democratic Party chairman.
Yes.
Bernie Sanders person, and on this commission. She has urged the commission to ignore its mandate to encourage primary elections.
Yeah. Oh,
and therefore, that's not going to happen, in my view, now. And I think that the Brazil story is as much about that as anything else, to give the Sanders delegates leverage. And Elizabeth Warren said as much. We have to placate the Sanders people, she said. Tom Perez has to placate the Sanders people.
Well, everybody has to play coalition politics at some point. Although you hope that people then join the coalition.
As goes. But now you're telling me we have to rig the process in Bernie's favor to placate his people.
That would be their hope, certainly. But then you're not talking about a coalition.
David, I'm not going to mince words. Elizabeth Warren said we had to rig the 2020 primary in favor of Bernie Sanders to placate the Sanders delegates. That's what she said.
It is, I guess. So what?
All
right, I say a lot of things.
What is Tom Perez supposed to be? What else is Tom Perez going to offer them? What else do they really want? Do you think they want 3 staff members in the stupid DNC sitting in a cubbyhole?
No.
Everybody knows the DNC is impotent and useless. The only thing the DNC matters for is these rules. The DNC will have to placate them on the rules. It's going to be about favoring caucuses. Now, they were all pepped up about favoring open primaries and same-day registration. Yeah. And I believe that it was their plan, and it may come back, to say that any state that holds a closed primary, we won't use the closed primary results. The state party will hold a caucus. And I still think that may bubble back. Be careful. I got to where they denied that that's what they wanted to do, but I don't believe them. And I know that I can quote chapter and verse from Namaki Const, where I know that's what she had in mind. Careful that they don't feel emboldened to try to bring that one back. But they certainly will not enforce the use of primaries where available instead of caucuses, particularly in Washington State and Nebraska. My understanding is that the Washington Democratic State Party is very much considering dropping its caucus.
I see.
So that'll be good. Minnesota has dropped its caucus. Colorado dropped its caucus. Yeah. Maine is dropping its caucuses. So what you're really left with is if this all happens the right way, you're going to be left with Iowa, Nevada, Nebraska, and a bunch of and other Republican states, Idaho, Wyoming, those types of states that don't hold primaries. Everybody else generally holds primaries. So that's actually, if that happens, it's not a great story for Bernie because he doesn't do as well primaries as he does in caucuses. We'll see how all that turns out. But the bottom line is all that's being discussed now. On January 1st, 2018, the Unitarian Reform Commission is charged with presenting to the DNC's Rules and Bylaws Committee their proposals and recommendations for these rules.
Yeah. Okay.
I think they're going to be egregiously bad. But we'll see what the Rules and Bylaws Committee does with it. If the Rules and Bylaws Committee does not take it up, the Unity and Reform Commission will have the right to present it to the full DNC membership in a vote. So it's going to get a vote.
Yeah.
This is going to happen. So you need to find out if you care about these things, if you care about rigging on either side. If you want to rig it, as the Sanders delegates want to, then you should be fighting for that. If you're anti-rigging and pro-voter suppression, or rather pro-voter participation as opposed to pro-voter suppression, you need to be fighting for this too. This is the time to care about what's going on in the DNC right now. Talking about what happened in 2016 is a waste of time. You need to focus on what's happening in the DNC right now.
Well, that's always true.
Rant over.
Yeah, okay. and well taken. And I think it reinforces a lot of the same points that the rules are written when nobody's looking, and it's not like, oh, let's write them when nobody's looking necessarily. It is everybody decides to stop looking. By the way, I think that if they got their way, the Sanders delegates to this Unity Commission, I think there's a 50-50 chance that they find out that next time caucuses aren't that good for them. Not that they learn, oh, it's voter suppression, but that, it's like, are you sure? In hindsight, you did better at caucuses. And I know why. I understand why. I'm not positive that you can replicate those results. And, of course, if it ever comes to the point where Bernie Sanders just says either I'm too old, I'm retiring, I'm not running, whatever, and then but the movement, our revolution should continue. We definitely want to do these things. And you'll have fought for caucuses, and you'll end up with a new candidate that inherits, 65% of the Bernie Sanders coalition of support and becomes the new Our Revolution candidate, and you go forward to caucuses, and it's going to be meh. Caucuses are a pain in the ass. I'm not going to caucus. I went that one time. I was 20. Bernie sounded like a good idea. I wanted to fight the system, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's, I don't know, it's Elizabeth Warren. She's great. I'm now 32. I'm busy. I have kids. And she'll be trounced in a caucus, and then it'll be like caucuses are rigged. And it'll look like it, too, because who shows up for caucus? Normally it's your party activists, the people who actually dedicate their lives to these things. And they were surprised to find out that they were outnumbered by Bernie Sanders people in some cases in these caucuses, because there was a moment going on, and they were able to push 20-somethings and 30, and older, 80-year-olds too, who were willing to show up. And it's a big pain in my ass, but for 3 hours this week, I'm going to do it because I'm a big believer in sticking it to the man or whatever. And Bernie Sanders really speaks to me, and so I'm going to go. Getting him to do it repeatedly, I don't know. And I think you'll find, all of a sudden maybe we kind of like open primaries with same-day registration. That's something we can keep people's focus on, and we can replicate our numbers there. But too late. You already committed yourself to caucuses, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see them, I think, eventually come around to, no, you know what, primaries are better. And firehouse primaries at that. And that, like I said, it opens up a whole new can of worms. There was a whole thing we didn't even discuss in the last couple of weeks because the election's going on in Virginia. There was a whole fight, although it wasn't about the off-year elections in Virginia, not the state elections, but my local congressional seat, and I don't know, did you happen to catch wind of that one? That one was a really
tell me about it.
Interesting battle that went on, and it's, I guess, still going on. The 10th congressional district of Virginia. Virginia Democratic parties, the local parties, organize themselves in some interesting ways, not just by locality or by county, but also by congressional district. There's so for ours, the 10th Congressional District Democratic Committee that encompasses, cuts across county lines and municipal lines, but all the people who are going to be voting in the 10th Congressional District are nominally represented in the way these things are organized. And it's got its own chair separate from the, Loudoun County and Fairfax County and other county Democratic committees. And, I guess I'll make the long story as short as possible. Is the county, the Congressional District Committee had to decide, how are we going to select our nominee for the 10th Congressional District for the Democratic Party, taking on Barbara Comstock, who's the 10th Congressional representative right now, the horrible Barbara Comstock. So, how are you going to do it? And the answer is you get together, and the 10th District Committee meets, and they have a vote. They make a decision. So the new chair of the committee says, okay, everybody, he calls a meeting and he says, listen, there are 4 options that the state Democratic Party rules allow us. We can do a primary election, which is, paid for by the state, and we just do the whole thing. Voting machines come out and we have an election. We can do a caucus, which has its own problems, and everybody knows what those problems are and you outline them. We can do a convention, which has even worse problems than the caucus because it's a caucus that's exclusive that you can't even get into even if you want to.
It's a terrible idea.
There's the firehouse primary, which is, as you mentioned, sort of like a convenient caucus. It's not paid for by the state, and so therefore you don't take out the voting machines and everything, but you announce ahead of time among the party. You use your whatever mechanisms you have to announce these things. Say, you're gonna come in and you cast the paper ballot. You write down or you check off the name, who you want, and you can come anytime between 6 and 9 p.m. at the following locations.
Just as an aside, even in a firehouse caucus, you're going to get 1/10 the number of voting locations in the best circumstance.
Right. But, it's another option.
It's better than Iowa.
Yeah. So, of course, they have the meeting and they discusses that stuff, right? And some people then object. They're like, look, everybody knows, and this is interesting because sometimes it was actually some of the Bernie Sanders fans were there and were actually saying, everybody knows caucuses suck. Really? Okay. I'm glad you admit that, whatever. But basically everybody said the caucus and the convention is just outright crazy. That doesn't have any serious even attempt at getting widespread voter participation. We don't want that. So we shouldn't have such a thing. And why don't we just say right now, look, it's between a primary and a firehouse primary. Those are the two options where lots of people can vote at their convenience, and we should just decide on that. But the chair says, all right, very interesting, good points and all that, but we're not going to, eliminate anything from consideration. We're not voting today. We're going to vote at next month's meeting. Okay? And that's basically what ends up happening. Now, there's a big fight over how everything was said and how everything was framed. A huge explosion.
Yeah, I do remember that. And frankly, what they should have done was eliminate the two, just as you said.
Yeah, they probably should have.
The last two.
Now, a great explanation offered by this poor guy who, moronically actually said, I'll take on the thankless job of doing this
exactly.
stupid, I hate local politics. I'm invited every week to go to the 10th district things, to go to my county thing. I won't do it. I can't stand what people do to each other at these things. So he says, listen, we're not going to eliminate these options right now. And people go crazy. How dare you? You're rigging the primary. You're rigging the system in favor of XYZ candidate. As it happens, there's one leading candidate. She's the local state senator, so she's the biggest name in the bunch. There's other people who are running. I joined the resistance. I should be in Congress. Okay, whatever. The resistance. Sure, you protest at things. That's great. I love it. I want to actually vote for somebody who turns out for those things too. But instead, it becomes this bitter thing, and they're like, the chair, he's an insider. He's rigging it in favor of the institutional dem who's going to run away with it if they just hold a regular primary. And huge fight breaks out, and the guy said, and then people are like, well, why wouldn't you just eliminate the convention thing? You're saying you're holding the door open for a convention. That's because you want to rig it. And he says, I noticed the meeting. That's, the terminology. I gave out notice of today's meeting that said we were going to discuss the options, and that at next meeting we're going to vote. If I entertain a motion to limit the options that you can vote on a meeting I noticed for next month, people are going to kill me because I'm holding an unscheduled, unannounced vote without letting people know that they needed to be there to cast their votes if they had an interest in how we would do our selection process. And he's absolutely right. He would have been killed for rigging the process by having a vote that would be that crucial without telling anybody he was going to do it. That would absolutely look like rigging. And the big irony of all this thing is this new Dem chair is a Bernie Sanders activist, motivated to join the party and actually do the things we ask him to do, and he gets stabbed in the back within seconds. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. I once again have dedicated the whole show to this single topic. But my release valve and all this, I think, will be I'm going to have to record a show for Monday, even though who knows what could happen over the weekend. We'll be traveling, and I hope then maybe what I ought to do is just record that today and get to all the stories I meant to read to you today. But this is important stuff. That's all right. No, I was going to probably end up doing it anyway because I got so many threads that explain these things. And then, of course, we have comments to deal with. Well, like this one. I have this comment here, and I share this one reservedly. Jingy here, who tweets as Real Jingy, and a frequent commenter, and I think I'm guessing is a big Sanders fan as well. This is the kind of thing that makes it impossible for me, quite honestly, to go to these local meetings and participate because it's just too infuriating. I mean, I understand the motivation for the comment, I think, and it's a common kind of comment, but it's like, you know what, if you don't have the patience to work this out and to talk this stuff out, you're going to frustrate yourself and you're going to end up fighting in these things and poisoning the atmosphere so that people like me don't go. Maybe that's good for you. Tired of hearing how many people agree with Bernie Sanders and want something better than we have now. Just tired. Shut up, right? Yeah, that's the entirety. That's a great summation of my discussion of the procedure and reminding everybody that if you really want things to go your way, you're going to have to knock your head against the wall day after day after day and go to these terrible meetings and be there to do these things. And even if you go do that, like this poor sucker who volunteered to stand for election for the 10th Congressional District Democratic Party in Virginia, you're going to find out that as a dedicated Bernie Sanders fan who only wants to do things openly and by the book and not foreclose any options and give everybody a chance to discuss, consider, and then come back and cast a considered vote, is pilloried as an insider establishment Dem rigging the election in favor of the Clintonistas. And, if you got to deal with comments like, I'm trying to give a thorough consideration of what's going on here so that we can understand and not have the same fight over and over again. And it is the same fight over and over again. And it's ironic in that you were discussing the 2008 election. Who used to think this whole thing was rigged in favor of somebody else? The Clinton people, because they lost, and they were, I'm going to Puma, and I'm going to sit it out, and they're going to win. I'm going to vote for Sarah Palin. I'm so angry. And, 8 years later, they win, and now a different set of people is angry and sitting it out, and I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. I'm so angry. And very few people, thankfully, actually did that, but very few people actually voted for Sarah Palin either. It's the same thing over and over again. The one exception, I guess, to all this, although it ended up falling victim to the same pattern anyway, was the Howard Dean thing. And Howard Dean people lost, and they doubtless felt that it had been rigged against them in some way. But
it was
far
the media,
more of
remember,
them.
the screen.
Yeah. Right, that's true. And they could blame the media, and so they were motivated instead to come out and join the local Democratic parties and actually work their way up and begin doing that horrible slog through the lower ranks. And a lot of them rose very quickly to become statewide chairs of their Democratic parties, etc. And but they found very quickly that they too were attacked as establishment insiders and screw you. And I wonder how many people cycled through Dean then Sanders and think the whole thing is hopeless. Because, I've been fighting for 16 years and I have not gotten my way. These people have been in the game for 30 and 50 years, and sometimes they get their way and sometimes they don't. But that, you can't just turn around and go home and say, well, problem solved. I went to a meeting, or I elected a guy who says he was a Sanders supporter or whatever, because people don't know, people don't care, and they attack whoever's sitting in the chair no matter what. And then they give up and they go home. Or, I go to participate and say, we ought to be considering these options. And don't forget that the process means something. And this poor guy who's being pilloried, deserves your consideration and your thanks for standing there and filling this role. And, if the whole thing can be summed up as oh, so I should just shut up and go away. No, the whole discussion has been about don't go away. If you go away, you'll lose. Fine, you're saying I should shut up and go away. I will go away. And then you'll lose again. And then you're like, see, I keep losing. It's rigged. No, you keep leaving. That's the rigging. You keep abdicating your responsibility. You keep leaving the field and then coming back and saying, I don't know why I keep losing these wars. This must be a whole useless system.
Yeah, well, when I lose, it's definitely rigged. That's true.
Yes, I will say, there are great examples of doing the exact opposite who are out there. It's not everybody who's doing it. The Atkins brothers, I would say, are a great example of that. I disagree occasionally with them on some very serious issues, but these are guys who never left the field, who actually went and have been banging their head against the wall inside the California Democratic Party since the beginning, since they realized what had to be done in order for them to get their way in 40 years from now. But that's what it takes, and they at least do it. And others who say, well, it's useless, well, it will be for you. It's never going to change.
Well, that's the end of the day, one of my central points. And you said, well, you're in there fighting for your rules, and I sort of facetiously was saying that. But I do think Democrats have no choice but to embrace maximum voter participation and to reject anything that smacks of voter suppression. We have no choice, because the Republican one of the central strategies that Republicans employ to win elections is voter suppression through a number of means. We talk about them all the time, gerrymandering. Mm-hmm. And we talk about, in terms of voting, going out and voting, we talk about voter ID. We talk about making voting very hard. But nothing that Republicans do makes voting harder than a caucus. There's simply nothing. Imagine if Republicans proposed that instead of holding elections, that instead we should just have caucuses.
Yeah.
What would Democrats say to such a proposal?
No, crazy, insane.
What if they just say, what if they say what they do say, which is early voting is bad? What do we say as Democrats?
No, crazy, bad.
It's voter suppression.
Yeah. It is interesting. You make a great point. How could you say, how could you stand there and say that when it's election day, this method of voting is insane and discriminatory? But when you're making your decision about who should be your nominee, it's great. Love it. Can't wait. Have more.
It's outrageous. Now, look, let me tell you what they've argued. The people I've been arguing with from the Unity Commission, Jane Kaleb, Jim Zogby, Namaki Kunst, those are the three main protagonists here on the Bernie side. Mm-hmm. And frankly, the thing that really enrages me a little bit is that the so-called Clinton delegates, they never say a word. They're just, I actually have a lot of concern that she picked crappy people, and they're going to go along. But that's her problem. You know what? She picks crappy people all the time. You really want to be criticized for her?
Yeah.
In
she's a good Democrat.
Why did Hillary lose? Mark Penn.
Yeah.
The decision to hire Mark Penn is the principal reason she lost.
I would say I never vote against holding or blaming Mark Penn for things.
Well, this is actually true. He didn't even know the rules. Remember, he had an argument with Ickes. I'll never forget this story where he thought the primaries were winner take all.
Ugh.
I said, how can you be the head of this campaign?
I don't know, man. How do senators not know what ATMs are, or not know that you can do reconciliation more than once in a year if necessary? They just don't.
Yeah. And she picks crappy people, and in a sense,
you may be right.
History repeated itself. If she was running and she wanted to rig the rules, she had crappy people rigging the rules. She should have had caucuses be disfavored, make people accept primary results. That's something they should have been fighting for in 2014. In that sense, she might have been a great president, but a lot of times she was lousy at running her campaign.
Well, a lot of people say so. A lot of Sanders people certainly say so, and that's why she lost.
Well, Bernie wasn't much better, though. Bernie had all this money.
That's true, too.
And
if he was
completely
better, he'd
blew
have won
off
the
the
primaries.
Southern primaries. You can't just blow off 10 states. You can't. You got to go in and compete. If you get beat 60-40, well, you got beat 60-40. But guess what? When you're splitting the
40.
delegates, that's a pretty close split. You can't get beat 80-20 in South Carolina. You can't let that happen.
Yeah. Well,
So, frankly, they both were pretty bad at the process.
That may be so. It certainly appears that way. And yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Like I said,
The Obama campaign of 2008 was especially brilliant in its understanding of the rules and its exploitation of them.
Yes.
And that's to his credit, because that's part of the job, too.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it was that, and I'm thinking back to that rules fight. This, I guess, it would be irrelevant to bring up at this point, but it does make me. It was a tremendous fight that went on to deal with. There were 2 rounds of it. The second round of the one we were talking about the state parties that skipped up ahead in line and trying to decide what to do with those delegates, because people were arriving or were shortly going to be arriving for the convention, and they had to decide, are people going to cast half votes? What are we going to do? And it was a big fight over it. And, by that point, I was, by that point, the nomination game was over. But I had never been a Clinton partisan in the 2008 primaries. But when they were trying to settle this thing in immediate advance of the convention, I recall watching the Rules Committee thing on the air, on TV, on C-SPAN, and saying, I'm not for Clinton, but this argument that's happening in the Rules Committee, her delegates are entirely right, and the Obama delegates are completely wrong by the rules, by the process, by all sense of fairness. There shouldn't be anybody voting from those states, and that sucks for them, but they did it to themselves. And this compromise of why don't we have half of them vote, or they all get a half vote? No, 0. And I favor Obama in this, but he was saying, yeah, sure, the half votes for everybody. No, there's no basis to award them anything. You're making up the rules as you go along. Literally, I'm watching you do it. There's no provision in the rules for this.
Oh, it was a cluster F of monumental proportions, and frankly, Donna Brazile was in the middle of causing that complete cluster.
Well, it was a mess.
I've never been a Donna Brazile person, so people think, "Oh, well, now you turned on her." No, I turned on her a long time ago.
Yeah, I didn't know what to think of her, but
she
all right, I guess I believe her.
She's well connected. She was on TV.
Seems nice. That's it.
Et cetera, et cetera. But she's pretty incompetent.
It was pretty crazy, and it doesn't surprise me that Hillary Clinton would have ended up with bad people on the commission either. I watching this morning, the other things I meant to talk about, including the tax bill now apparently moving in circles in Congress. Some great observations being made about it this morning, including some reporters being honest about it and saying, I'm astounded that there are still Democrats who believe that calling out Republicans on this tax bill because of what it's going to do to the deficit, that's going to work. You really have believed all these years. And somebody said, the standing joke here is the only people who believe Republican talking points are Democratic senators. That nobody ever really believed, apparently, among these guys, that the deficit and debt were a serious and real issue for Republicans. They were simply exploiting it because they were on the short end of the stick in terms of being in the majority in Congress, and they attacked the budgets that Democrats put forth because Democrats put them forth. And the grounds that they could come up with was, I know, people will be, if you say we're bankrupt and running up more debt, people will think that's bad because it's bad when individuals do it. And so, therefore, otherwise you either accept that or you accept entry into a discussion about modern monetary theory. And most people are going to say, that's like going to a caucus. I can't do it. I can't handle it. Being in debt is bad. I know that. Don't try to convince me otherwise. And then when the shoe's on the other foot and Republicans write the budgets, they just write the budgets as though deficits don't matter, because they don't. And then Democrats try and shame them into, well, last year you said deficits matter. I did? Oh, well, you lose. There's the budget. And
yeah, I mean, they're shameless in that. And
those guys end
care.
up on commissions, fighting it out with partisans of another kind.
You know who we never hear from when Republicans are in control? Maya McGinnis. You know her?
No. Maybe that's
She's the person who's always caring about the debt, the Pete Peterson person.
Yeah.
And when Obama was president, she was on TV and writing stuff all the time. But when Republicans are in charge, we never hear from her. Never.
Well, I haven't, so I guess that's true. Interesting. Well, one of many problems that we have and have to deal with, and haven't any time to deal with them. But some of the other problems we have to deal with, I will deal with later in the afternoon. You will hear me deal with them on Monday in place of my regular broadcast. And
right.
It will be our first.
Listen, I mean, we like Donald Trump have been focused on this DNC story, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. See, that's the other big problem with it. I'm not following his lead here. I have business in the Democratic Party. He has none. But yeah, he has exploited that all day long. And by the way, he went right straight back to Pocahontas.
Crooked Hillary, Pocahontas, and Donna B.
Yeah. Right. So he'll grow in the job. Everybody. Today was the day he truly became president.
You're voting. There's questions about the big Virginia governor's election that's coming up on Tuesday.
Yes.
As you know, there's a lot of hand wringing, and the media's doing what it does. All the polling still has Northam, fairly comfortably ahead. I mean, I've seen.
Ask Donna Brazile. She suddenly doesn't trust polls.
Oh, jeez.
Look, some prediction she had. I don't believe
she's
that.
A hack.
Remember that
she's
happened.
a dishonest hack who's trying to sell a book. And she doesn't care about you or me or the Democratic Party.
Well, she doesn't care about me. I know that.
Just don't kid yourself. She's not. She's not a good person. I mean, I think in terms of that, you've got to understand who she is.
She seemed like a nice lady.
Look, even if she wanted to write this book, why couldn't she have issued it after Tuesday?
Oh, I don't know.
After next Tuesday?
I don't know.
Could you write the same scandalous story 2 days after the election? Could Elizabeth Warren have waited? The funniest thing is Elizabeth Warren goes on TV because she wants to talk about the tax proposal. But of course, when she says what she says, that the primaries were rigged, nobody's going to remember what she said about the tax proposal.
Yeah.
I mean, did she not know that? Is she that bad at politics?
She's
she
still
did
kind
not
of
understand that.
And she has that coalition to put together herself if she's thinking of running for president at some point, and saying no to the rigging.
Bernie's not going to run, so she'll inherit.
I guess
because all she did was help Bernie. She didn't
now or later. Yeah, that was unwise. Yeah, the Virginia thing has everybody wringing their hands. I did see in passing the other day. I didn't even see the actual thing happen. It's my election. It's happening in my state. I still didn't see it. But I guess, like the talking points on the tax bill, I guess somebody spooked Ralph Northam with conservative talking points into reversing his position on immigration and sanctuary cities, and which of course
Virginia doesn't have.
Yeah, well, and we never will. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not certain where the motivation came from, but apparently,
let's be clear: sanctuary cities are basically just symbolic nonsense.
I mean, I guess
You don't have to declare yourself a sanctuary city to say, I'm not going to be a part of the immigration law program where you give me funds to scour for people.
You're just a poor city. I'm a city that isn't taking money for this thing. Call me what you want.
Right. Well, no, there's two things about that. There's money, and then there's other money. But there's the Sessions threatened some basic money, which was illegal. Mm-hmm. But then there's money that specifically you do have to cooperate with the IRS, the INS, or what's it called now? The
ICE.
ICE, with their deportation efforts. But the calling, I declare myself a sanctuary. That's just, that's posturing. And I like it. I mean, it makes a point that I'm in favor of, but it's nothing substantive. But he got hit on it, and for whatever reason, his polling said the thing to do was to do what he did. Which, we're going to not be in favor of sanctuary cities. And okay, big deal. And of course,
although it would have been interesting for him
shoot
to say, like you say, you get faced with the question, are you going to allow sanctuary cities or whatever? I don't know how they framed it. Are you going to allow sanctuary cities, or are you in favor of sanctuary cities in Virginia? It'd be interesting to answer. You don't need it. It doesn't make a difference. And I'll tell you why. Because you can do all the same thing. All the things that go along with being a quote-unquote sanctuary city are things you can just decide to do quietly on your own and make no difference whatsoever. And then the people who are living in your city who are undocumented find themselves getting deported less often than other places where the mayors are enthusiastic supporters of Donald Trump, then good, fine, But so why draw a target on your back? So are you asking me, are we going to draw targets on the backs of some of our more understanding and sympathetic mayors? No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Virginia's Virginia. I'm not from Virginia. There's two choices. We're 4 days from an election.
Yeah.
It's Northam or it's Gillespie. I mean, I'm not from Virginia, but if I was, I would be saying there's no choice here.
As I frame it, and this was Gillespie's choice to frame it this way, not mine, but if you are pro-racist murder, Gillespie's your guy. He wants to have more Charlottesvilles, and the idea of rallying around stupid statues and maybe killing some people while you're there, he's sending out postcards. I want you to know I'm for that. Ralph Northam not bothering to tell anybody that he is against it, really. But basically, Charlottesville was a huge international stain on Virginia, and Gillespie is campaigning on it. Pro-Charlottesville. I don't know how else you take that.
Yeah, I agree. And, this is gut check time. Now, I know there's early voting in Virginia.
Yes.
Either, I don't know if it's by no-fault absentee ballots or something they call them. Or is it?
Yes. Well, no, it is, or I don't know what they call it, no fault. It is
fault.
fault. You have
no
to go
excuse.
up. You have to, they don't have that. You have to go and make an excuse. But they accept your excuse. That's what I've done it a couple of times. This time I'm going to be back in place on Tuesday. I'm very often traveling back on Tuesday. They give the kids off Monday and Tuesday of next week. I don't know why they do Monday. Maybe just because why go in on Monday and then be out Tuesday? Or they just give people a long weekend. They do some teacher workshops. They close the schools because they vote in the schools. And they realized 10 years ago, well, we have, any number of strangers wandering the halls of our schools when our kids are there. And that's not good. So now they close the schools, so we take off. We leave. We take the kids on a short vacation, and then I end up not being there on Tuesday, even on presidential elections. So I usually do the early voting. You got to go. I don't know if anybody cares about this, but you asked, so I'm telling you. You stand in line. They give you a piece of paper. You got to declare where you're going to be. Why are you going to be unavailable? At work, out of town, and they ask you where you're going, why you're going, business or pleasure. I mean, really. The other states just say, you want to vote early? Go. Here we have to say, I'm going to Myrtle Beach. All right, give me a ballot.
All right.
So
you do have to make up an excuse.
Yes, although I didn't make it up, I was going to Myrtle Beach this time.
I
going to New
don't
Jersey.
mean you particularly. That's striking
Busted.
to me because
yes,
at least some reporting I saw said that that 40% of Nova ballots have already been returned.
That may be true. Yes, people do. Those people I'm sure say, I'm going to be at work.
Oh, if you can say I'm going to be at work? Oh, well.
Yeah, that's the excuse.
It's a Tuesday. I'm going to be at work. Well, that's a good excuse.
Well,
all right,
it's not hard, but they do make you make an excuse up. I don't know why, but they don't. They should just say, why do you want to vote early? Because I want to, and it's America. You know, that's not good enough. And by the way, who opposes that? Republicans. They want an excuse. You can't just say, I'm an American and it's my right, and what difference does it make? Don't count it until Tuesday if you don't want to. I want to mark a ballot and put it in a box. Nope, can't do it. Why not? Freedom. Oh, well, good excuse. Thank you, Republicans. That was great. Because freedom, I can't mark this paper today and have you count it tomorrow. American innovation, American exceptionalism, ladies and gentlemen. We cannot do this.
Well, you know, the arguments, there was a time when the Republicans would try to make a substantive argument about anti-early voting, which was, well, you don't know what late things will come out in a campaign.
Yes, Russia could fix it in the last minute. They could say...
Yeah, Comey could write a letter, for example.
Yes, right. All true. But you know what? You don't know what's going to happen the day after the election either. And that doesn't bother them.
Listen, getting people to vote is the hardest thing in America. We are terrible at voting. And part of the reason is we make it very hard. As you know, in Europe, most elections are on the weekend.
Yeah.
And they have... 14, 18 hours. They don't do that much early voting that I know. But I was actually in Paris the day of the first runoff of the French presidential campaign, when Macron came in first in that runoff, and all the others, and second was the Nazi woman whose name I can't remember now.
Le Pen.
But, it was very smooth. They got it all done. They counted the votes in no time. And they had like 78% of the population voting.
Pretty good. I don't know why we can't do it. We say we can't for freedom. And
one of the main reasons, frankly, and I think it's pretty well established, is we hold it on a work day.
Oh, yes. Well, that's a problem.
Not all. I know people work on weekends.
Yes.
But less people work on weekends than work during the weekday.
Yeah, well, the science is still out on that, I guess, and we can't figure that one out. I don't know. I'm not certain why we disallow it. I don't know why people accept it from Republicans. I think the excuse of you don't know what's going to happen in the last couple of days is now in the age of I saw the Access Hollywood tapes, but I don't care. I think that's now inoperative. I saw what could happen. Suppose that had happened on the last day. You guys don't care. The guy said he's grabbing women. We don't know what's going to happen. You're right. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what you're going to ignore is what they're really saying. So please, let me vote on my time off. That would be great. Thank you. And it's not difficult to do. Anyway, time for us to wrap up our show for the day. Thank you, Armando.
Dave, thanks for letting me rant.
You're welcome.
Have a great trip.
Thank you.
And have a great recording of Monday's show.
I will try and make that great. Thank you.
All right.
We'll do that again.
Make the podcast great again.
Yes. That's all I'll have to do. There is no after show today. No guys waiting to have the microphone handed over to them. There are some great programming, though, lined up for you in place of the after show. Just too much going on in Justice's life. Wish him well. Now would be a great time to perhaps support Netroots Radio and all the people behind it as we face challenges going into the future. But background briefing will be in place for your listening pleasure now that you have chosen to make Netroots Radio the place where you set your fake virtual radio dial all day long. Okay, I am going to set into recording a show for Monday and getting to all the stories that I ordinarily would leave to the after show guys for batting cleanup on. There are an awful lot. There's still more about the Brazil thing, but I think I think we might have just killed it on this at this point. And I don't know if we change anybody's mind either, but we've discussed all there is to discuss. I think covered a lot of points. It's time to get back to reminding you what a freakish embarrassment Donald Dotard Trump is, and we'll do that with the next show.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
So thanks for listening. As I'm looking through Pocket and seeing what I missed, it seems like there's a theme emerging, and maybe the Monday show, although it's probably a bad Monday show theme to say. Basically, I'm finding more and more stories that make me question, why do I get out of bed in the morning? Why is there any purpose in working when you can just fake your way through life? We'll see about that next.